across the air, CKM building a radio lair.
Uncle Bill from DEADPIT Radio here, setting out to do a fun video that I think that a lot of the people that watch our show will like. And it's long in the making because this has been something on my mind for a while. So I figured I'd get on here and kind of have a conversation about it and try to talk my way through it, talk my way out of a maze, walk my way out, if you will. And why are some of these horror films so divisive? There's a list that I've got of some of the most divisive horror films that I've come across. And we're going to talk about what makes it so hard for people to agree on these 5 films. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Are you indifferent to them? Whatever the case may be, you know, state your case in the comment section. I'd like to hear what you have to say about whether you love or hate these films and why that is. But I'll just start at number 5 of, in my opinion, some of the most divisive horror films ever, and that is Rob Zombie's Halloween. I think I kind of know the answer to some of this about why this movie is so divisive. Number one, Rob Zombie's style is a complete departure from anything else that had been done with the Halloween franchise to this point. He's got rednecks, they're cursing. He's got an origin story. Most horror fans hate origin stories, especially when they relate to like killers like Michael Myers. There's a nostalgia factor to it. A lot of the kids that are coming of age right now were really young kids when this movie came out. I should say young adults that are coming of age right now are really young kids when this movie came out. So there's that part of it. Like a lot of the films that we came up on, like, the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Streets. Well, this is like their version of that. So they're kind of attached to it. I think that's part of what it is too. A big part of why this movie is so divisive, though, is because it's 2 movies in one. And a lot of people say that one is better than the other. Some people can't get past the origin story part with the stripper mom and the William Forsythe character cursing and throwing shit and being like, essentially complete scumbag. Uh, the horrible acting by Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis. But the second half of the film is almost a direct remake of the original Halloween because I feel like Rob Zombie felt like he needed to do that. So if you can get past some of those things, I feel like people look at it as a completely fresh kind of retread of the movie. If you can get past the dialogue and you can get past the kind of mesh of those 2 ideas in one film, I think that maybe you could see some artistic merit in it. It's an incredibly divisive film, though. People either love it or hate it. I don't think I've ever met anybody who was like, "Oh, I just kind of like Halloween." The Rob Zombie version. They're either like, "Fuck that movie," like that's like an affront to Carpenter and to all this stuff, or they're like, "Oh my god, like that was the movie that I loved, and that's a standard movie that I watch every Halloween, and like I love his take on it." So, Rob Zombie's Halloween, one of the most divisive films in the history of horror films, I believe. Number 4 is the Blair Witch Project. Um, why is this movie so divisive? To me, this movie is a classic. Of course, I grew up at the time that this movie came out, which also might have something to do with it. I grew up right around the time this movie came out, and I was there for all of the publicity. And I think that this movie is so divisive because a lot of people hate handheld camera movies, and a lot of people hate the shaky cam kind of footage style. But I was around during the time when this movie came out and when the marketing campaign for this movie was trying to push it as a real movie, and people were genuinely terrified and excited and amped to see this movie in the theaters. Plus, there's 2 camps on this movie. There's one where like, "Oh my god, it's boring and nothing ever happens," and there's the other group of people that's like, "It's a slow burn but like everything in it is terrifying. Like you're watching like the de-evolution of these characters to the point of they're almost like in, these manic states, they're running around, they don't know what's going on, they're lost. It's like a real version of what would happen if you were out in the woods and you didn't know what the hell was going on and something was following you. But some people hate the fact that there's no creature, there's no, real entity or anything to look at, and it could be seen, I could see, like, as being a boring film with an ending that's probably the most divisive ending of modern horror films anyway, that people either really love or really, really, really hate, and you hear a lot of people talk about that too. That's my number 4. Number 3, um, and I think that, I've never understood the hate that this movie gets. I've tried, and I guess, like, part of me gets it because it's not campy, really. It's much more serious, but, yeah, my number 3 is gonna be the 2013 Evil Dead. I thought it was a interesting take on that franchise that was super gory, like, way before the Terrifier stuff, like, and all that. Like, this movie was doing stuff that was really uncomfortable to watch, but it's divisive, I think, because number 1, people kinda wanted a male lead, in this just because of Ash and all that. Number 2, there's certain aspects of the film people don't like. The fact that she's an addict, the fact that she went up there for that, like, they don't like that component of the story. Other parts about it that they don't like is it doesn't have a fun kind of atmosphere to it where there's like slapstick humor and comedy and things like that that run throughout it. And trust me, I love a good horror comedy as much as the next person. Return of the Living Dead, Reanimator, all that stuff. Shaun of the Dead. I love all those films. This wasn't that type of film, and I wonder how many people went into it thinking it was going to be much more so. But it's incredibly back and forth about people whether they like Jan Levy's performance in this and whether or not they like the actual film itself. Some people said it was too dark, literally and figuratively too dark, and some people did not like the script whatsoever. My number 2 in the grand scheme of things, I've had this argument with people. I defend this film, and I'll tell you to the death, and I'll tell you exactly why I do too. And I can't say enough about this film really, but my number 2 film is Stephen King's The Mist. I saw this film in the theater. I know what it was like when it was out, when people were watching it in the theater. The reaction was as if somebody had, like, kicked a puppy in front of all of us. They were like, "Fuck." Um, that's how you felt coming out of that movie. And the first thought that I had coming out of that movie was not, "Oh my god, like, I can't believe how horrible that is," or how bad. My first thought was, "That took some balls." Like, I was actually excited for once that somebody, anybody took a risk in Hollywood and on a film like that and made an ending that they absolutely knew was gonna have go away heat with people, was going to just piss so many people off. It's not in the book, and it's completely, not your mainstream popcorn kinda ending. That being said, that is the main reason that movie is so divisive. Most people actually like the movie. Um, it's got some great actors, great scenes, pretty decent CG for that time period. So most people like the movie all the way up to the ending, but the ending of that film will probably go down as another ending that just absolutely splits people one way or the other. Some people say it's needlessly kind of just, depressing and nihilistic. And then other people, like I was saying, like myself, are like, it shook things up. It did something that, people would not do at that time period. It took some risks, in other words. So The Mist definitely belongs on this list. And my number 1, most divisive film. And I hear people talk about this film over and over and over again. And it's relatively new. And I was actually kind of surprised because I didn't realize how many people had an issue with it. And you could actually combine two of his films, and it would make sense to me. But my number one is Hereditary. And you could take Midsummer and Hereditary and combine those two films, and they're both incredibly divisive among horror fans. I think that has something to do with just A24 films in general. I'm not sure it's as much about those movies as it is the style of movies that come out of that studio that people are so split on. Because I know people that hate that style. What you would consider, the highbrow horror films, the intellectual horror films. I'm not going to use the term elevated horror. I mean, I hate that term. It's a ridiculous term that caught on, but that's what people are calling it. But people hate that type of movie. There is a group of people, a large group that are like, I don't want anything to do with anything like that. And maybe that's not the reason why, you that are watching this video hate it. Maybe you hate it for the characters, maybe you hate it for the pacing, which I will admit both of those things are suspect in some ways, especially in Midsummer. But maybe love the films because they are so outside the box and they are so unlike anything anybody's seen. And they spend so much time creating an atmosphere that is so different in a world that is so different than other horror films around the same time that were coming out. Maybe you appreciate that part of it. But there's this battle of those films. And I think that battle rages on to this day. You know, that film in particular, Hereditary, and also Midsummer as well, you'll hear people go back and forth. Well, I loved Midsummer, but I hated Hereditary. I loved Hereditary, but I hated Midsummer. Like, it's never ending. And I think it will always kind of be that way just based on what your sensibilities are as a movie watcher. Do you like action filled kind of stuff? Do you like slow burns? Do you like what kind of writing and dialogue do you prefer? What kind of tone do you prefer in a film? And that's going to determine whether or not that you like that movie. But it is definitely one of the most divisive films, two of the most divisive films. It's kind of an extra bonus, if you will. It's a bonus for you. And that's it. That's my short list of just films that I continue to see people argue about constantly and just always seem to come up. And if you throw that out there, just try it. If you're in a chat room, throw one of those films out and you will automatically get a fight. You'll have a fucking fight. There'll be people, cursing your mother. There'll be people saying, you ain't worth a damn. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. You only like certain things. You hate everything. You don't hate everything. You should hate more things. But it will definitely get an opinion. But, that's my list. I'm sticking to it. So check us out over at DEADPIT Radio. If you want to like and subscribe because you like these videos, I'm going to continue to do some of these shorter form videos like this, just topics that I want to talk about that I think are interesting. But also go over to Into the Dead Pit on Instagram. You can check us out at DEADPIT Radio on YouTube, which is the big thing for live streams and videos and things like that as well. I am Uncle Bill, and see you later.
I'd like to tell people thumbs up the video, Uncle Bill.
Would you?
Yes. Thumbs it up with violence and fury and just love everything about it.
You hit the heart button, then you hit the ass button, then you hit the go fuck yourself button. Follow that up with the I don't give a shit button.
There's all kinds of wonderful shirts over at shop.deadpit.com. Simply the best horror shirts. On TeePublic, there are others, but they all suck. You can get some Dead Pit Radio shirts. You can get Last House on the Left. The Hills Have Eyes. Texas Chainsaw. Oh, wait, you can't say Texas Chainsaw. All kinds of shirts, folks. You're gonna love them. shop.deadpit.com.
Special thanks goes out to our supporters on Patreon. Do you know what kind of stuff you can get on Patreon, Uncle Bill, starting at only $1 a month?
What's that?
Access to every Dead Pit show since 2005. We got almost 200 fan commentaries that we've done over the decades.
We have a literal jukebox full of songs and thousands of reviews. I don't even know how many shows are up on there now that we've done over the years.
Hundreds of thousands.
You need to figure this out now and subscribe to us on Patreon and YouTube and Instagram and help us to 1 million. The road to 1 million subscribers starts today.
So deadpitonpatreon.com. Join today. Tiers start at only $1, but I'd recommend at least the $10 tier.
You can do 50. The stock market's crashing around us, folks, but send us money.